And we're live. So I just want everybody to welcome to today's Savvy session that we are connecting with ProfitMetrics. As always, just want to make sure that everything is working. So if you can just put a comment on YouTube, we already have Antonia and Eddie. So if you can please just put in a slight note that you can hear me, that the sound is working, then that would be
That's
lovely.
mine as well.
And as always, I'm always annoyed by the fact there's a 15-second delay on what we say, and what comes out on YouTube. So now I'm just anxiously waiting for the comments to come in on YouTube. Okay, dance is good. Hope there's other people than Dan. Jens is
Perfect.
here. Awesome. It looks like everything is working. So now I just need to actually just go back to slide 1. Otherwise, it's going to look weird. 1, 2, and 3. So today we're going to talk about in-depth strategies. And Eddie, are you saying hello from LA? It's like 2 a.m. over there. So this is a rare session where I'm actually in Denmark. So that's why you can see people walking around in the background, and why I have this nice headset on and not a super nice mic like Frederik. But today we're going to talk about in-depth strategies for Performance Max. A lot of these things are going to contain the same some of the slides that I also just gave last week in Munich, that I just want to say gave a standing ovation and 2 selfies. So I think some of it is pretty good. And then we have, of course, have like that pitches in with some explanations on his side. So just want to say, most of you know me, so I'm not going to go through too big of an intro. But for anybody who are not familiar with Flag, maybe you can just give yourself a quick intro.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Frederik. I'm the CEO and founder of ProfitMetrics. I've been working in e-commerce for 17 years. I came up with the POAS KPI, and we are helping e-commerce businesses and agencies around the world optimize for profit.
Awesome. And I just play around with the stages here in StreamYard, and I'll do that for the rest of the day. So we'll try some things that don't work. Awesome. Can I remove my mouse? Okay, so the agenda for today is that we're going to talk about the issues with running a single Performance Max campaign and why that actually happens. We're going to talk about why the algorithm needs help, and then what other advertisers achieve by creating a more complex campaign structure. And I'll also explain a little bit about how simple a complex campaign structure has to be. In other words, it just has to be different than your single Performance Max campaign. And then we're going to talk about the solutions, what basics needs to be in there, what kind of campaign structures do we have we seen working for different scenarios. And then towards the end, we're going to share Frederik's approach to creating these campaign structures very easily. And I'm going to take the nerdy approach to say how we do it in Savvy. So there's going to be 2 ways to actually implement all of these things. There's going to be the simple click that Frederik provides, and then we in Savvy has a little bit more of a custom approach if some of the out of the box numbers don't work. So, but without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Frederik to get started.
Thank you. Yeah, most businesses have already moved over to Performance Max, but as we all know, there is some problems with Performance Max, especially this one campaign approach, and we all encounter those problems, like we are lacking margins, are lacking the product level control. It's essentially Google that pushes the products and decide which ones gets pushed. It's not always the ones we want it to push, maybe not the best-selling products or those that actually aligns with our business strategy. But before going into the problems, we need to look a little bit at what Performance Max actually is. And if we look at Google's algorithm, that is probably the best one in the world, but it's designed to be universal. It's made to work out of the box for all businesses like lead gen, local, shopping, hotels. And its only job is to meet a target we set using the appropriate bid, but it doesn't understand if that target is correct for the business or what it actually means for the business. So if we take the first problem, that is the average ROAS problem. So let's say we are asking for 500% in ROAS. We have a product with 100 in spent, it hits 7. Then we have another product in that campaign that hits 3 and also have 100 in spent. Google have given us 5, exactly what we asked for. But is this actually what we want? The one at 3, we're actually losing money on it. The one at 7, we are making a lot of profit. So maybe we want to decrease the bids on the one that we are losing money on, and the one we are super profitable on, we would maybe like to increase the spend if there was more volume to get. But Google have done its job. We asked for 5, it have given us 5 because it's an average of all the products within that campaign. The same goes for POAS. If we ask for 1.5, so 1.5 euros, for example, back in profit every time we use 1 in spend. If we have the same spend on 2 products, one hit 0.9, so that's unprofitable. One hits 2.1. Google have given us 1.5 in average. And this is where we see often that more than 50% of the ad spend in this 1CAM approach is actually used on unprofitable products, simply because 5, 10, 15% of the products are super profitable. So it takes that average up, allowing Google to use spend on unprofitable products because it still meet that target we asked for. It uses the average between all the products. The same goes for sleeping products. Some call them zombies. They have many names. But often we see that 50% of the catalog never get any traffic. So if we look at what the job is for the algorithm, if it has, let's say, 2 pans, one pan with a lot of historic data, it has clicks, conversions, it knows what to bid to meet the target. And then we have a pan without any data, so a new product. If Google needs to meet that target, it would essentially be a gamble to use too much spend on a new product because it could risk not hitting it, where it would be easier just to keep on spending on the products that it actually has data on. And this is why we see that there is so many new products we create that never gets any spend, because it's a gamble, and it's actually what we're asking for Google not to do, not to gamble with our money. We need to have Google to meet that target. The same goes for revenue. If we ask for revenue, we often get revenue. So Google would tend to use most of the spend on, it could be high revenue products with a lot of volume or discounted products. But essentially the high volume products, they often have very intensive price competition, so the margins are slimmer. Or discounted products, the margins is simply given away. So asking for that, you will still get the revenue because that's what you asked for, but it doesn't look into the profitability. So for example, order 2 here, we actually have a lower revenue, but it's much higher in profit. We could actually bid more aggressive on that, but Google don't understand that because we're asking for revenue. So what most marketers have done in the past is to use product margin grouping, essentially dividing your products up in high margin, low margin, mid margin, and then set appropriate target ROAS on those. And if we look into that, it has problems, in my belief. If we click on, for example, AirPods, some would buy only AirPods, but some, like in order 2 here, also buy accessories with it. Some even buy products that is not the AirPod, it's a whole other headset. So using product margin grouping, what we will normally do is we would take the margin of the AirPods. So here I just made up 20%. So we would take the revenue of all orders coming in and then calculate the gross profit to find out where we are breaking even based on the AirPods, even though it's not only the AirPods or even the AirPods that have been bought. So if we look at the real profit on these orders, you can see order 2, we're actually making 25% more profit than if it was based on the AirPods margin. Or order 3, we are making 65% more profit. So when we're using product margin grouping, we are actually losing out on a lot of opportunities. We could have been much more aggressive here if we looked at the orders. And where it becomes dangerous is when you're doing marketing on high margin products. If people end up buying low margin products, you could actually be running unprofitable ads. So this is where the marketer comes in. And I believe that the future of the marketer's role is to translate business strategies and goals into something the bidding algorithm actually understands. Back to you, Andrew.
There you go. So I just wanted to one of the things that I always like when I see people talk about these things that you talked about, and when it comes to like what smart bidding actually does with our campaigns, and that it sometimes neglects new products, that it doesn't show or give equal spend to all the products. I want to reiterate that that's a feature, not a bug. Like it's supposed to do it, and it's supposed to go out and say across all the products, well, some will have a high ROAS, some will have a low ROAS. So optimizing for an average ROAS is the best option when Google creates a billing algorithm like this. So all these things that we're talking about today that we're trying to fix is actually trying to create workarounds or different strategies around how to better utilize these features, because I really just want to say it's not a bug. These things are not actual problems with the smart bidding algorithm. It's really smartly done, no pun intended. But there are ways to get more out of it, which is what we're going to talk about. But I just wanted to iterate, this is not it's not a bug at all. It's a really smart thing that it does that we wanted to do in 90% of cases. We just want to control it a little bit more and give it a little bit more guidance. So we decide how much we want to lose, or how much unprofitable spend we want, how many sleeping products we want, and stuff like that. Because then it starts getting really, really interesting. So yeah. So what we're going to talk about is, what if you could help PMax? What if you can set the optimal ROAS or POAS targets? What if you could waste less ad spend? What if you're never limited by budget? Because PMax and budget limitations are kind of funny, because the more limited by budget you are, the more limited by budget and less exposure you get. But the more budget you put in, like the Savvy approach, just put in $1 million a day, not quite as high, but like put the budget as high as possible, and then just let the amount of searchers figure out how much we're spending. Can't really do that with PMax. And then what about if we just activate the sleeping products when we want them and need them to be activated, and how we get new data to new products? So that's all the things we're going to talk about with how to structure PMax to actually do that. But before we do that, we need to make sure that the basics are in place. So I'll talk a little bit about the basics right now, and then we're going to move back into campaign structures in a second. So it's my core belief that you should always exclude brand terms, or you'll end up skewing your product data. So let's say we're creating a campaign structure where we're putting that's a bad example, but bestsellers in one and low ROAS in another campaign. Great. But if you have brand terms that are associated to a product, and people are not buying that actual product, and that's not why that product is showing a high POAS or high profit, then you have an issue. Then you're not getting the right data to actually categorize your product. So when you're categorizing and creating different structures for PMax, it is urgent. It is super important that you exclude brand terms, or you'll start skewing all the data for all this. I'm in general also just a fan of just splitting it out. Like, this is an example of a campaign structure I created for a large brand out of Europe, where the only thing we actually did was we removed all assets. In this case, it didn't make any sense to have assets in there, so no video, no images. And then we split it up into brand and non-brand. This allowed us to say, okay, we're going to maximize the ROAS we're going to get from our branded terms and not overbid. And we're going to go in and now we can actually manage how much additional spend we can use for non-brand that produces more new customers. And over time, we're just able to just produce 73% increased ROAS, almost 50% extra revenue in just a 6-month period. And all of that was simply just because we could scale in and scale out of seasonality. We could manage everything much, much better. The next thing I just want to talk about when it comes to Performance Max is that most of our spend is shopping ads related. And this is not supposed to be one of those talks where we go, just remove all assets, just do all that because PMax doesn't really work and stuff like that. We're not going to talk about that. The reason why we're talking about campaign structures today is because 85% of the spend is in shopping ads. So spending time creating videos, creating time spending banners and stuff like that, maybe it works sometimes, maybe it works for some industries, maybe it works better in some countries and all these things. But the gist of everything here is that 85% of the spend is in shopping. So we need to also look at the way we optimize Performance Max campaigns as to how do we help shopping do better. And that's one of the things that most people forget, is that they are not spending enough time when it comes to how to optimize PMax for a shopping ads perspective. Most people just spend time on, how can we create asset groups? How can we create better assets and images? And they completely forget that 85 to 90% of the spend is shopping. So that's mainly what we're talking about today. Hey, I had a slide on this. So this is about shopping ads. So I want to just let everybody know I love this feature. It's the new customer acquisition feature. I think it's amazing, and I think it's amazing for a lot of different cases. But I also just see a lot of people just completely mess up the use of this. So I always start with saying that most of us, most of the accounts that we run in Savvy, and we're pretty big accounts, are not sophisticated enough. We forget that the conversion value that gets reported added here, and again in this example, is an extra 1,000 krona for every single conversion. It is listed as revenue. And if you run with profit on top of this, then it's an even bigger issue. And the thing is, all this gets reported evenly inside Google Ads interface, and you have to kind of click on segments and different conversion types and stuff like that in order to see that how much is actually being produced. So what I often see is that,
yeah, and the big problem about this one is when you go into Google and upload your existing customer list, it by default calculates this value and just set that. So as soon as you click save, if you're not super careful about, if you don't see this number, you're actually saving that number. And if you're then running new customer acquisition ads or campaigns, this number will be there in the number in all of the conversion value. So it's super important. If you don't intend to use it when you import your existing customer list, at 0.1 or something like that, because you cannot just put 0 and you have to have a number, but be super careful that it doesn't just add the default value it has calculated, because it's in most cases not correct, and it's based upon cookies, and cookies get deleted. So how can it actually predict that data if it's not based on server side data and so on? Yeah.
Exactly. So and we see the same thing across the board. Like nobody does the math. So they just look at the 1,000 krona that gets added to it and they go, okay, this is 1,000 krona, but what does that actually do to smart bidding? Like how much more is it going to skew towards new customers, and how many of those new customers are actually new customers, and how many of the existing are actually existing? So nobody I've talked to generally do the math on this. So yeah. And the second thing, I see startups go in and say only bid for new customers. And again, it's paradoxical. If you're a startup or if you're just starting out, 99%, maybe 100% of all customers coming in through Google is for new customers. So this setting makes no sense. I've seen it combined with this. So they'll apply a value to new customers, but 100% of them are new customers. So just, again, basics in place. Let's make sure that we don't do these things. I don't want to nag on new customer acquisition. I think it's a really, really cool tool, and I think it works really well for Boost. I think it works really good for Zalando. I know it works really well for H&M. Big advertisers with big budgets, and they have their math in order and their data foundation 100% in order. It's a nice way to just push smart bidding in a direction, but for most of the people out there, it's not relevant. So campaign structures for different scenarios. So we're going to go into talking about 5 different campaign structures here. So we're going to talk about the seasonality split. We're going to talk about setting the POAS levels, ROAS levels, focus on POAS. Then we're going to talk about on sale versus not on sale. We're going to talk about this whole structure when it comes to average ROAS, sleepers, and new and unprofitable. We're going to talk a little bit about it, and then we're going to jump a lot more into detail when we actually talk about how to set it up, because otherwise we would just repeat ourselves throughout the entire webinar. So we didn't want to do that. And lastly, I'm just going to talk about high and low margin products, and because you're not supposed to use it, but there is some use cases where that actually does make sense if you don't have access to something like ProfitMetrics. So, but without further ado, I'm going to leave it over to you, Flag, if I just remember to click the button.
Yeah. So essentially the solution where we're looking at before, product margin grouping, which we could see had its flaws. What is the right approach? And I'm probably pretty biased, but what I believe is the right approach is essentially to go in and say the AirPods are attributing to several orders, then calculate the real profit on every single order and send that back into the Google for that ad click on AirPods. So you can actually have conversion value or profit conversion value on AirPods that don't even come from AirPods. But by sending it back, because it's the product you're doing the marketing on, then setting, for example, a target POAS of 1.5. So you're asking for 1.5 back in profit every time you use one. you're actually telling the algorithm what CPA the Google can bid to meet your target, because it's based on real profit. So it's apples to apples. So again, you're helping the algorithm to steer towards the real objective you have. If it's profitability or just getting the transparency, so you know how aggressive you can actually go on different products, even if they buy something else. Back to you, Andrew.
See, this is when I have to remember to change slides. So the seasonality split. So one of the things that I love to talk about is when we have just like some really, really basic, easy seasonality, then splitting it up makes a ton of sense. Because let's just say you have summer and winter, and most of us that run apparel brands, we have a lot more complicated setups. But just to make this a little bit simpler, we have summer, we have winter. Summer starts in April, it maxes out in June and July, and kind of run on last legs in August. In Europe, it depends a lot on how good of the summer is in August. We can still sell plenty of shorts if it's hot. If it's rainy, nobody sells shorts. But on the winter side, again, September, new collection comes out. We start ramping up the spend and the funnel, and around October, November, we're starting to max it out. Whole issue here is that the ROAS target we have to set for summer, as that starts to peter out, as we start being on last legs, we're most like what happens towards the last part of a collection is we're running out of sizes and variants, so it's going to convert less. We're going to most likely also have a bunch of promotions running, so we have a lower margin. So the ROAS target we need at that time when we're starting to ramp out or ramp down of the summer collections, it's completely opposite of what we're supposed to do as we're ramping up the winter collection. The winter collection needs to start spending, and with a low ROAS, we need to get the funnel in, buying a winter jacket, buying and like we say in Denmark, a flyverdragt. It just requires you to take a couple of weeks in order for you to find out what you're supposed to buy and stuff like that. So you cannot have the same ROAS target at the same times. And also, like as we're moving into winter, there's no historical high performers. We have no historical performance. It's from last year, and often it's a different collection from that point. So we don't have anything to actually tag it on. So most of the time, it's going to spend too much money on summer, even as we're ramping out of it. And I have a nice little example here. So this is where we're ramping out of summer. We see spend decreasing a ton, or revenue decreasing a ton really, really fast as we grow out of it. And we can see winter, this is the exact same time period. So we can go back and forth, and you see like where it is that winter actually starts scaling up in terms of revenue. And you can see there is this period in time where there is just not, ROAS is pretty low and revenue is pretty low, and we need to ramp up and down of winter. The other reason why I love having these campaigns split out is, do you see the same thing that I see? How easy is it to see the ramp down and the ramp up when it's together? It's tough to see. Nobody notices, oh, what, as you can see here, like this the exact same data date frames are in here. So you can see right where it's supposed to start increasing in ROAS for winter and decreasing ROAS, increasing for summer and decreasing for winter to ramp it up. You can't really see that here. So that ability to see it in your face just makes it a lot easier. And it means that at one point in time, there's an inflection point where the same ROAS target for both winter and summer makes no sense. So that's why splitting it up into seasonality, whether or not that's summer or winter, can make a ton of sense based on your business. And then the next one is on sale versus not on sale. Especially in Europe, we don't really have this thing in the US. They're starting to crank down on it a little bit, but in Europe, we have this thing where we can't have a product on sale for more than, 3 weekish, and then it needs to be off sale for 30 days, 45 days. So we need to do something in order to make sure that we can actually have a product on sale and not on sale a lot. So what we see a lot is that a lot of products are, when they're on sale, then they just convert better. So what we of course have to do is apply a seasonal bid adjustment for everything. All products are on sale, and then the products that are not on sale, maybe have a lower increase, and sometimes we don't increase at all. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we'll just decrease it outright for products not on sale. The problem is that we can't do it for product for a asset group level or on a product level. It has to be on a campaign level. So in order to actually get the best out of our on sale periods, then we have the ability to create different campaigns. So that's kind of what we're trying to showcase here. So in this case, in Savvy, we took a slightly different approach. But I love the example still. So we have one campaign where all the products are on sale, and then we have the not on sale split into two different campaigns. We have the ones where we have higher price than competitors, and then we have a campaign where we are lower price than competitors. That allows us to go and say, okay, anything on sale, as you can see here, we have a 4.5% conversion rate. Anything with low price is almost pretty close to that, and then high price is 360. One of the cool things here is that everything is approximately the same ROAS, very, very close. And that's obviously because they're being managed to this group, this campaign, this group of products needs to hit this ROAS, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody, all the campaigns are working towards the same ROAS target, more or less. But the conversion rates are different, and we can push and pull however we see fit with seasonal bid adjustments. Sometimes we push hard, sometimes we push back, and we can do that for products on sale, well, not high price, low price, because we've split them up. So I love having a separate campaign for any products that are on sale. Again, if our business strategy is to always have 10, 20, 30, 40% of our products on sale, then this is a magical campaign structure. And then it is Flake's turn to talk about average ROAS, sleepers, and new things like that. And there we go.
There we go. Yeah, one of the ways to get away from this one cam approach is essentially to use an advanced campaign structure where you want to reduce the average between the ROAS targets. So let's say you have a campaign up here with your very high profitable products that has a lot of volume. Then you have a campaign with your profitable products with they are still profitable, but maybe not as much volume. And then you have your unprofitable products and you have your products with low traffic. By separating the products up and having its own budget, you can then prioritize to use that budget only on the high profitable products, for example. And then you can remove the unprofitable products down in a campaign that have a budget only for the unprofitable products. And this is where many would think that, okay, an unprofitable product, let's just exclude that from the feed and not market it at all. But the point is here, when you move it down and you still have a target in the unprofitable, so it's only have products that are unprofitable, but you have a target. What you're actually doing is you're helping Google to steer to find the right new bid to meet the target. So maybe before you had, let's say, 10 conversions, but you were unprofitable on this product. Now what Google will do is it doesn't have those really high profitable products that takes the average up. So now it needs to decrease the bid until it meet that target. So maybe you will only end up with having 5 conversions, but you're actually meeting your target. So you're helping Google's algorithm to find a new bid to meet that target without using the high profitable product averages to pull it up. And then once it becomes profitable, it'll be moved up to the profitable products. And then you will have the only profitable products back and having that budget to help Google steer and find that right bid. The same goes for the sleeping products. Removing all those sleeping or new products into its own campaign, then Google do not have all the products that are similar with a lot of historic data. So Google will start experimenting. So then allocating some kind of budget, a percentage, maybe 10, 20% of your budget to those sleeping products. Then you will try and awaken them. And once they get, you could set a threshold. Let's say you had a 5% conversion rate, then it would be maybe 20 clicks. Once it hit 20 clicks, either it becomes unprofitable or it becomes profitable. So you actually identify if some of these products is actually profitable opportunities and you move them up, or if they are not, then you at least know and they are moved to the unprofitable one. And maybe Google can find a new bid that actually meet that target. But you keep on having your budget only allocated because you're moving the products with data away. So you are keeping that budget to be used for experimenting and try to activate those products that never get any clicks. Back to you, Andrew.
I need to get back on stage. So I talk to a lot of advertisers, and one of the biggest challenges that I hear out there is this misunderstanding around high and low margin products and the campaign structures. And I feel like you and I spoke about this like what, 6 years ago when you were just starting out with ProfitMetrics, and I was explaining why people like margin labels, and I also explained why I agree it's a horrible solution. But when I talk to advertisers out there and they go like, I can't afford ProfitMetrics, I think it's a ridiculous answer. But the one thing that always comes back to it is the fact that what you're trying to do is to not spend money on low margin products. That's typically the one that people come and say, hey, I'm selling this brand and we only have a 10 or 20% margin. Everything else is 50% margin. That's what everybody's trying to do. So if you can't jump in and do the profit-based bidding right now, I see that, okay, try to avoid going too in depth. That's what I always say. Choose one of the other campaign structures that we're talking about here, and then take, okay, if it's because you're trying to not overspend on a low margin product, or if you want to spend more money with a different ROAS target for your private label, awesome, you can do that. Like that's definitely possible, but don't try to create a campaign per, like I see often, like 10% margin level. So you have one for 10%, 120, 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, 180%. And because you never know what people are buying, you don't know what add-ons they're putting in there and stuff like that. All the reasons the flag already talked about. But if you're just sitting and going, okay, I don't know, I can't set up this structure, Andrew, because I have these low margin products that I'm scared of selling and they can't have the same ROAS target. Awesome, just take those and put in a different campaign, and you'll at least try to save a little bit on it. You'll never really defend yourself you'll never be able to defend yourself if you're selling if you're selling a sneaker brand, you get 10% off and you're having on the keyword and you're targeting the keyword sneaker. You'll never really know if they buy the brand or not. But you can at least say if somebody's searching for Nike sneakers and you have 10% on Nike sneakers, your ROAS can be pretty high. So it's a way to go in there. Margin campaigns, I honestly don't think they work, but if you don't have the option, you can still do some kind of margin split as a last resort before you go into ProfitMetrics, which I get no referral fee, which I don't understand still, but it's still a good. It's by far the best option if you have different margins inside your assortment. And now, so Fly is going to start, as we mentioned before, we're going to talk about how to create all these different campaign structures, because it's super nice for us to say it and say, oh, look at all these fancy ways of doing it. Oh, this is nice. All this is super nice. But how do you actually do it? And this is where most webinars will stop. But we said, okay, let's add a how to actually build all of these campaign structures so you don't have to manage them by yourself in the future, and how can you actually do it so it's easy peasy. So Fly is going to start. It's going to talk about how to create it with ProfitMetrics and the shopping booster setup that they have that's coming out. Is it already out or is it coming out?
It's actually still in closed beta, but I think we will launch it next week. It is finished. So
I like it. I think it's cool. So I'll let you explain it before I just go crazy with trying to explain it for you.
Yeah. Essentially, all of these problems we wanted to solve them, and that's why we created the shopping booster. Essentially, it's an advanced rule engine that enables you to create custom labels based on performance and first-party data. And now you're probably thinking, isn't there a lot of tools and scripts out there in the market that does this? Yeah, definitely there is. But Shopping Booster is quite different. So first of all, it takes like 5 minutes to set up, or in minutes. We have different templates. So it's not like only one template. Here we can see the POAS booster that is made for POAS. We have a ROAS booster. We have an order-based break-even ROAS groups. I will explain that later. You can also make campaigns from scratch. But where it's very, very different is it has a total customizable rule engine. So if you use a template, you can customize it. You can build it from scratch. And you have the and or if rules where you can essentially set up whatever goal or strategy you have. You can convert it into a campaign structure that allows you to get Google to essentially work towards those goals and strategies. So one of the things here, for example, in this example, we also have is the OR. So let's say you have a POAS of 1.5 or you had a ROAS of 5. That would be your threshold, and that would be what would be counted normally as this. Everything over that is profitable products. That's our best products. But sometimes if you're asking for 1.5 back in profit, what if it only hit 120, 1.2? It will still give you 20% of profit after ad spend, but it's not hitting your threshold. So that would actually be moved away and maybe would be seen as an unprofitable product. But here you can, for example, go in and say, or if I want to have all the products that have a total profit after ad spend greater than 500 in the last, let's say you had a look back window of 90 days. So this way you can say, these should meet my threshold, or these should have a total volume, because the volume is just super high, even at a lower profitability, they would still be counted. So those sort of rules you can also set up. So it's just not only one rule, you can actually use several rules in this rule engine. Then, of course, we have all the standard Google KPIs like clicks, ad spend, conversion, ROAS, revenue. But then we have the profit metrics, exclusive metrics like the real gross profit, the POAS. This one I just showed you guys, the total profit after ad spend, which is really interesting. Then we have profit after ad spend per conversion. And then we have the order-based break-even ROAS. I'll also show you that. And we have like sale. So let's say, like Andrew talked about, let's say you wanted to have all the products that are discounted with more than 20%. Maybe you want them to be moved to another campaign where you have a different bid strategy. Maybe you shouldn't bid for ROAS or POAS. Maybe you want to just use maximize conversions or something different because you actually want to push them, or maybe you want to push less on them, but you have this ability. And then what really makes it what I believe is amazing is that you can combine it with all your first party data. So maybe you have something like supplier promotions, or you have seasonality, or you have overstock, or maybe you have very few sizes back. Then you maybe want to have something with size availability, or you have a pricing position. So are you very competitive or not competitive on price? All of these first party metrics, you can combine them with the revenue, the ROAS, the POAS, and all the other KPIs. So essentially you're allowed to take whatever strategy and goal you have, and then make it with the rules into a campaign structure that fits exactly what you want the algorithm to do. And then the attributed order break-even ROAS. That is essentially a way of doing profit bidding or steering the algorithm on real profit, but still have the conversion action revenue as the primary. In some cases, that is, you want still to have the revenue as primary, but here you can actually steer on it. And where it's different than product margin grouping is that it looks at the total order. So instead of with the AirPods, again, it's only using the margin from order one with the AirPods alone. It actually goes in and take the revenue and profit from the attributed orders coming back and sending it back to the AirPods. So here you can see, before we saw that it was 5 in break-even ROAS. Here you can actually see this one is 4, this one is 3. So this is an average of 4. This way you could, for example, make a template, which we also have, that is everything between 3 and 4 in break-even ROAS, but based on all the attributed orders, not the product they clicked in on, and then set a target of 5 or 6 depending on your what you want in profitability. But this way you're actually letting the algorithm still run on revenue, but steering on the real attributed profit. So that's just a super cool way, and sometimes an easier way to get started than changing your whole campaign structure to POAS right away. Maybe you take some campaigns with this, see how it works, and then you change the whole structure to POAS. And then, of course, there is a huge benefit that we both have revenue and profit on product level. So let's say you're running on a ROAS, even though I believe POAS is better, I'm biased. You maybe have you want to have like a threshold of 5, everything over 5 in ROAS. You can then still use POAS as removing product that is unprofitable. So here you can say, okay, it can't be that some cases, even though they're over 5 in ROAS, they're actually unprofitable. So here I just go in and say, if they are under 1 in POAS, they will be removed from this campaign. So you can actually combine revenue and profit rules in the rule engine. And then we have the share function. And this is essentially for saving time. So let's say you have 5 countries you're selling in. If you're normally used to setting up some of these rules in some kind of feed management tools. You know, whenever you have to set up a new country, you have to go in manually, and it's very time consuming to set up all the rules again and again. We have a function where you make an automation, then you just click share, you get an ID, and then you go into the other website, copy paste it in, click import, and then it creates all the rules. And this is also if you're an agency like Andrew. Maybe Andrew, he makes 5 or 10 different recipes or automation that he believes is perfect. So once his colleague gets some kind of customer, then maybe they have one for fashion or they have one for electronics or whatever. They can just pass that ID over, and then his colleagues can super fast create that and then just customize it for that store. So it's essentially a time-saving feature. And then we have the insights. So like many other of these tools, they also have insights. But what makes this really, really strong, and I just saw a comment or question regarding the threshold. So let's say you ask for 5 in ROAS, and then you can see in the bucket how many products is there, how many conversions, or how much profit after ad spend or ROAS or revenue have it created. But maybe you want to see, okay, how many products would it be, and how would the KPIs in the look back window look if I decreased it to 4 in ROAS? Then you can just go into the rule engine, take it from 5 to 4, click save, and then go back and see how the products moves around. So it's just super easy to actually find the right fit and just look at how the products will move between them based on the rules and how you change the rules. So this is essentially the shopping booster. And as Andrew said, it's or asked, it's still in closed beta. It will be open next week. But if some of you want to try it out, just go in on ProfitMetrics.io, book a demo, and then we can help you guys set it up. If you're already a customer of ProfitMetrics, cool thing is this is included in the price. It has no extra cost. And if you're a new customer, yeah, it will be included in the whole product. So yeah, a little bit of promotion. Go into ProfitMetrics.io and book a demo, and we will help you guys get started and test it out.
So the thing I like about all this is that this is basically what we've built in Sheets. It's a little bit more fancy than what we've built in Sheets, but this, I don't want to you kind of just mentioned it here towards the end. I don't want to just scurry along on this one. The ability to change the metrics and the filter and the thresholds and the levels to know how many products and how much spend are going to land into each bucket is key, because otherwise you'll sit, and this is what I often see with people trying to create campaign structures with PMax and shopping in general. They'll pull out some kind of number, and then they'll have one campaign with 95% of the spend, and that doesn't work. Like, you have to find out, okay, what is your threshold? Let's just say your best-selling products. What is your threshold? For some e-commerce companies out there, it's 60% of the products. For some, it's 10% of the products. It varies greatly from store to store to store. So being able to just slice and dice the numbers like this is something that we do in SavvyRevenue and Google Sheets all the time, so that it's built in, so you don't have to actually do all the stuff I'm going to talk about in a second. I think it's don't undervalue the ability to do this. With that being said, so if you don't have ProfitMetrics and you still want to try to say, okay, how do we build some of these campaigns dynamically, and how do we manage it? The way that we've done it in Savvy for the longest time is simply just doing it with a supplemental feed. So supplemental feeds are greatly undervalued, that you don't have to combine your existing feed with the new feed and all these values. You can just go into Google Sheets, put in the values you want, run some formulas, and then only upload these additional values. So in this case on the right here, it's very, very simple. And I'm using a different example than PMax. So this is for standard shopping, but it's really cool, especially from a POAS and ROAS perspective. All this can sound really, really confusing and daunting, but it's really simple. I'm just going to go through it really, really quick. It's just combining SavvyMetrics and Google Sheets and turning it into a supplemental feed. You can also use Data Slayer. There's a bunch of others in there. If you're like Philip and I here in Savvy that got on SavvyMetrics like 6 years ago, and we still have a legacy pricing, it's still priced wonderfully. But otherwise, if you don't have a legacy SavvyMetrics account, Data Slayer is our go-to for anybody new in Savvy. And the stuff you just go through is you pull out all the data with SavvyMetrics into a Google Sheet. you add custom labels based on a formula, you import it into the Merchant Center, and then you set up a PMX campaign based on that custom label that you're running. That's it. You have campaigns based on data that's being processed from Google Sheets with the supplemental feed. So just to give you an example, so this is a Google Sheet where we're pulling out based on what the impression share is, or search impression share, because we have a theory that if you're running profit-based bidding and you are at 90% plus impression share, or top impression share, then you don't get that much out of bidding to 93%, 95%, 98%. So if we can set a target that's different for anything with a high impression share, and we can set a lower target for anything with a low impression share to push volume in there, then that's gonna be the way to go. So the way that we simply just do that is we pull in all this initial data: clicks, conversions, conversion value, profit, search impression share. I create a conditional formatting then, so I can more easily see what do we have high and low impression share on. And then we just create some formulas. We have a POAS formula in here. We have a POAS classification, where we're basically doing the exact same thing as what I just mentioned, where we say, okay, in another sheet, we have, okay, if it's over 100 and what is it? I think it's 200, 200% POAS, then we're classifying as a high POAS, and if it's under, then it's a low POAS. Same thing with impression share. We combine them, and based on these formulas, we then say, okay, what should the campaign classification be? Is it a high target campaign or the main target? And that then allows us to simply just go in, set it up as a supplemental feed, upload it into Merchant Center, and setting the targeting in PMX. It's really that simple. Antonio asked which if supplemental feeds are going away in Merchant next, which is the next version of the Merchant.
They are not there yet. They are not there yet. But I spoke with Google, and they are saying they are coming. And Google were supposed to automatically move everyone over to Merchant Center next. I think it was in January, but it doesn't look like they have done it. And I think it's because several features are still missing. But it should be coming over there. That was at least what I was told by Google.
Awesome, because if this stops working, like, then the simple thing is simply just to go in and say, okay, we'll just upload the supplemental feed as a supplemental feed in our feed management software, like Data Feed Watch, Channable, Feedonomics, whichever one you use, you can combine and merge feeds and all of those. So here it's just skipping a step, actually.
Yeah, or else you can actually do it through API. So there's also a possibility to shoot it in through API. That is already in Merchant Center Next, that you can set it in there.
Awesome. And so now it's time. Oh my God, we got really big all of a sudden. So let's jump into questions. So we have a bunch of questions that were asked. So first off, will the slides be available? Maybe. We'll send a PDF with the slides. Just let us know, or Lucas will actually do it. Otherwise, we'll start jumping into some of the questions. Just start from one end. So Matt is asking, so for seasonality, are you using the same campaign for these items, or are you using separate campaigns? They're separate campaigns. One campaign for winter, one campaign for summer. That's it. What we've done is we have created what I call evergreen campaigns. So there are products that just sell all year round, like suit pants sell all year round, light jackets sell all year round. It depends a little bit what country. You don't sell a lot of light jackets in Denmark. In the States, we sell light jackets all year round, especially California, where I'm from. But it's separate campaigns to be able to set different ROAS levels, manage the spend, increase, decrease ROAS as you're moving in and out of collections and seasonality. Ricardo, you ask, what are the conversion thresholds you use to decide on splitting, and what granularity, or not at all? Do you have any thoughts on that, Fredrik?
It's always the question of how granular. Of course, in the past we were very granular, and we love that, but it also it depends a little bit also on the volume, because you should have within each campaign you should have a certain amount of conversions, and what the right number is, nobody really knows. But but I would not say that you should go over in the look back window or go under 50 conversions, because too much granularity can also be a problem. Yeah, and too little, we just saw that is a huge problem. But yeah, it depends a little bit on the volume. So don't go too deep if you don't have huge volume of conversions, because the algorithms still need data. What do you see, Andrew, in that one?
Same thing. Like let's say you're running let's just say you're running 200 conversions a month. I would most likely, like, unless you're seeing that those 200 conversions are coming from 10% of your products, I would most likely not split that up at all. Like, there doesn't seem to be a lot of value from it. If you have 200 conversions a month that are from, let's just say, from 10% of your products that have a much higher ROAS than the rest, then splitting them out in their own campaign, setting the ROAS target so you can maximize the exposure and then maximize the revenue from them, and figure out in a separate campaign saying, like, how the heck do we spend more money on the rest of the products and what should we be spending money on? Because sometimes the algorithm is also correct. The 90% of other products have gotten data in the past, didn't convert well, so it shouldn't be spending money on it anymore. That's a smart thing in the algorithm that we sometimes forget. It does do good things. And sometimes when it's not spending money on a product, it is on purpose. But I would still try to investigate. Again, if I have an e-commerce store, I've been running it for, let's just say, 5 years, a product that didn't work 2 years ago could easily work today. Or maybe let's say you had 6 months of Temu bombardment within the party supply industry, like we're seeing right now. All of a sudden you'll see products that used to do well not perform at all, and when Temu goes away, which they inevitably will, then you're going to start seeing that those products should start performing again. But if they're in sleeper mode, they never get any data, smart bidding can't see that they're actually starting to perform better again. So
yeah, and sometimes it can maybe also just to have one campaign and then have a campaign where you remove the unprofitable products, simply just getting them away. So you're not allowing the algorithm to keep on spending on something that with certain is unprofitable and maybe never will be profitable, because maybe you don't have the right price or conversion rate on the site. So you can actually never be profitable on that product. Of course, go in and get those removed.
Dan says if that is true, and he's referring back to when I was talking about 85% of the spend goes to shopping ads, and 99% of conversions go to shopping ads as it is today. Should just focus on feed only or shopping only performance max campaigns, and that's a completely different conversation. Not really. It's my belief. Like, I think it goes back to what kind of company are you running? If you're running a D2C brand where there is a likelihood that, especially YouTube and display, can have some success, I'm not 100% against running assets. I think that at some point in time, Google will most likely figure out how to use all these assets properly, give good reporting back to how we can optimize those assets and all these things. That was a big part of my talk back over in Munich around all these things. 2 days later, I met with the product lead. Me and Fredrik was at Google in Stockholm last week, and he was saying, yeah, we're not giving any placement data away. So it's clear that they're having an issue with placements and people not understanding how to use the different video, display, etc. But it's also very clear Google doesn't know how to actually use them to perform well enough yet to show us the data, because otherwise they would just show us the data of how well it was performing. So I like feed-only campaigns, especially if I want to do anything good on YouTube or display. But if you're a small business, if you don't have a big e-commerce store, putting it all together is the promise of PMax, a simple campaign type where you target retargeting, you target search, target shopping. That's the whole point of PMax. So if you can get better results with feed only, especially for large stores, yes, in my opinion, yes, because a large electronics store is not supposed to be on YouTube. That's simple. Next one is baby gear. What if the products are constantly on sale, not on sale? How do we prevent PMax from being in constant learning if products are divided into groups based on whether or not they're on sale or not? Do you have any thoughts on that, Fredrik, or should I take that one?
No, take that one. But essentially what we build in the shopping booster is also that you can set how frequently it should update. So there is some of these tools out there, they would just update or move the products every single day. But maybe even though the product, all the bits are actually on product level, so that should move around with the campaigns. But the overall target is based on the budget on the campaign. So if you suddenly remove a lot of products, Google needs to learn how that new budget should be allocated between the products because it's moved. So sometimes you would maybe only want to have it to update once a week, or maybe if you have a longer sales cycle, maybe you only want it to update every 2 or 3 weeks, so it doesn't jump up and down. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, so my take on this is that generally learning mode is not a thing. Like if you're running into like an issue with quote unquote learning mode in PMax, I would remove assets. Like that's where the danger lies. Google does store performance data across your entire account for shopping ads. It goes into product ID. That's why if you ever change the product ID, you'll see it just absolutely like the account blows up. You might as well start a brand new account because it doesn't know what it's doing. So it stores all the performance on the product ID. So moving it from campaign to campaign to campaign is generally not an issue. And we like I often do slides where I say Savvy should be out of business if some of these things didn't work, because we create campaigns where we move products around all the time. But like Fredrik says, we don't move products around every day, and we rarely do it on a weekly basis. That's also too much. So if you just move products around every 2 to 4 weeks, that still keeps everything really strong. And then again, if you go from a not on sale to on sale, the on sale will usually have a bit, like we want to have that performance in there going, hey, in this campaign, we have products that have a higher conversion rate. So it will most likely a bit higher the second it hits there. And then in Savvy, we'll do some things. If we see issues with this, we'll for instance, use max and minimum bid portfolio strategies for standard shopping. If we start seeing these things being an issue, but we'll start with PMax, see if we can get it working. If we see too much waste, then we'll start using standard shopping where we can control these things. Morten says, it sounds like you assume and want PMax to primarily go for shopping placements. However, there are no guarantees with PMax. Wouldn't it be much more effective to be sure and use standard shopping? So yes, 100%. Like you're like preaching to the choir here. Like I'm like the fact that people think that you can't use standard shopping anymore, and Google reps running around saying that they're not working on standard shopping anymore. Awesome. That's not a big problem, because it's like it works really well. Shopping ads work really well, really well, and that it doesn't start appearing too much on display and YouTube is not really a problem for us, because we don't see that many conversions come in yet. Maybe in the future. With that being said, there are some advantages in PMax as I see it. There are also some retargeting things that it does do. So we have this ladder, prioritization ladder in Savvy. We'll start with PMax feed only. If we're starting to see issues, if it's overspending on display, if it's overspending on YouTube, if it's doing some weird stuff because it works differently with budgets, we'll just scale down. We'll run standard shopping instead and remove that waste. But that's also because we're being paid to maximize Google. And I can't go out to an advertiser spending $100,000 a month and saying, oh, we wasted 5% on display last month when I'm being paid 8%. Like that's what I'm being paid to fix. So, but for most advertisers out there, unless you see an issue, I don't personally have an issue running PMax. And if you have issues with not going through shopping, then feed only is a great solution for that as well.
Yeah, and also saying all the strategies we went through, the also apply for standard shopping. It's the same thing. Yep. That you can move products around, and like we talked about last week when we were in Stockholm, the algorithm, if you're running PMax feed only and standard shopping, of course we don't know how the algorithm exactly is in Google, but why should it be different? Why should it have a different algorithm? So essentially, you're trying to get Performance Max to do the same as standard shopping. That's my opinion. Maybe I don't know the full picture, but why should it be a different algorithm running the bits?
my interpretation whenever they say this, it's that you're not getting and when I talked to the product lead last week too, is like there's none of this where the campaigns talk together, which they're supposed to do in Performance Max. You're not getting the DSA, you're not getting the display, the YouTube correlation between all of them. And I poked fun at their case studies, because when they do case studies for accounts running standard shopping and running PMax and have converted, the case studies are always like, they're not split into network types. So if you only spend money on standard shopping and now you're running PMax, it's not split up what the growth was. Was it in shopping? Was it in display? Was it in brand? Was it in retargeting? Like, so I always poke fun at it and they don't like it. So Darren asks, any issues with running the same product type in separate campaigns? So 10% margin t-shirts in one campaign and 50% margin in another. Which does Google prioritize? So because next question is for you, Flag. I'll take this one. So there's no issues whatsoever. So what you're most likely going to do when you have a 10% margin t-shirt in one campaign and a 50% margin in another, you set two different ROAS targets. Unless the 10% margin t-shirts out convert like 5-1 the 50% margin product, then Google will still prioritize and set higher bids for the t-shirts that have a 50% margin, because you have a lower ROAS target. So that's the way to kind of say, okay, it's going to prioritize one or the other. If you're using standard shopping, you can still use the priority settings to prioritize one margin group over the other, or any product group over the other, which I'm still a huge fan of, and hope it one day comes to PMax. I think it might, but generally there's no issues whatsoever. Then Thomas asks, is it better to have a PMax structure like high profit zombies, or one PMax per category on our website? And I'll tell you this, Thomas. I know Thomas has a lot of categories.
Yeah, in my opinion, I believe that it's better to do it performance based, because let's take the headsets like I've talked about in all the slides. All headsets doesn't perform the same, even though it's a headset. And yeah, you're doing the marketing there, they perform differently. But of course, there is those cases where it makes a lot of sense to have some categories. But using the performance would in most cases always give you a better result, depending, of course, on your goal. But if you want more revenue, or you want more profit, or maybe a balanced top and bottom line, you would get that with using the performance metrics to actually granulate, because you need to remove those unprofitable products. You need to, in order to get those zombies to get any spend, you need to move them over in a new campaign, because otherwise Google will keep on spending on the similar products that it has data on. And you cannot achieve that with having one categories for headsets.
And I 100% agree. So what I've just seen nonstop, when you try to do the category, one PMax per category on the website, you run into the granularity issue with not enough conversions. So it'll work fine for, let's say you're selling leggings. It'll work fine for leggings. You sell thousands of leggings a month. Awesome, will work fine. But for some obscure category that gets 5 conversions a month, that's going to be an issue. And that's where PMax, because you can't put a portfolio strategy on them yet, hopefully you can do it at one point in time, but you can't do it yet. So you can't put the same target and use it all to work together. So it's just going to work in that little sphere, and that's an issue. So generally, one PMax cat per category on the website is not a good idea. We see much better results when we go for instance, the PMax structure, high profit zombies, or the performance-based structure by far. Yeah.
Is that all questions, or?
There is one more, and I just want to say one from Antonia, just because I wholeheartedly agree on this, and it's one of my points in Munich as well. Can't see a way YouTube and shopping can share the same ROAS and a PMax, but we get an average. 100%. Like we will never be able to get the same ROAS off YouTube as we get from shopping ads. So until Google allow us to go in and say, hey, on YouTube non-retargeting, then, or in general on YouTube, we want to have 100% ROAS or 50% ROAS, or we want to go for this upper funnel conversion, etc., etc. I don't see any way that we get any strong YouTube performance out of PMax. So yeah, I generally agree. So for seasonal bid adjustments, Dan, would you suggest excluding non-sale dates if you're on off-sale time, mostly on? Nope. Don't have to exclude. Don't have to do anything. Don't have to do the data exclusion. It figures it all out by itself. We do help it sometimes with some early seasonal bid adjustments. We also help it generally when you go out of sale with lowering bids and stuff like that. But that's kind of the whole idea of having two different campaigns, so Google will get that nudge going, hey, now it is in a new campaign. That campaign generally converts lower. It's kind of a way to help smart bidding. It's a workaround, and allows us to put the right increases, decreases on seasonal bid adjustments, so properly go in and out of sales. So we have one more from Christian. What's your take when it comes to the creative part, ad copy, and everything when running these PMax structures? Oh, positive or negative? Like, which one should we take? So I believe that beyond choosing keywords, which in any industry out there, you're gonna hit you're gonna find all your keywords within a month, unless you don't know what you're doing. So at that point, after that point, anything becomes the creative part: ad copy, videos, images, and what I call off-platform optimization, which is pricing, margin improvement, conversion rate optimization. Off-platform, on-platform. You're asking to on-platform, so I think it's like, just because it's PMax, I usually see people just putting in assets that are just generic across the board. Big selection, buy now, all these things, and they're just horrible from a creative part. So ad copy, do have to create something good. When it comes to images and videos, I think that most people are over-investing in video for PMax, because I just don't see the value coming out of it from most brands out there. Where images, especially when you go into promotions and stuff like that, it tends to be working okay. It's still really tough to know how much spend you're eventually going to put into your high performing campaigns. Christian follows up with, would you make different creatives for high profit, etc. I don't really see how. If you're selling a high profit headphone and a low or headphone that's performing worse, think that the amount of work that would tell you to do that for the amount of spend that goes into display, it kind of, in my opinion, misses the mark in terms of what you're supposed to be spending time on from an impact and resources standpoint. Awesome. I think that was it. We've run out of new questions. We did have some questions that came in from before that, but I think we should hold it here. If you have any more questions, then both Freilich and I are available on email. If you have anything at all, just hit us both up on LinkedIn. Last thing I'm gonna say is, we would love to get your feedback. Did you like this? Did you think it was too long? Too many questions? Too few questions? What would you like to hear about next time? So Lucas is going to send out a small survey. It's just going to ask you a question whether you liked it or not and what we're supposed to do next. That's the survey. It's not more fancy than that. So I would love to hear what you want to hear more about, so we can make sure that that's the topic that we cover next. So yeah, other than that, I just want to say thank you very much for being here, Freilich. This is the first webinar I've done at 10 a.m. in years, since I did a 2 a.m. webinar from LA, or from San Diego, a couple of years ago. So it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, guys, everyone.
Thank you. And click.